Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about what I consider to be the pros and cons of doing a PhD in lockdown, online, virtually, whatever you want to call it, just being a PhD student during these crazy times. So I'm at the point now, I'm 1 year into my PhD, 6.5 months of my PhD I have been doing from home. So from mid-March until now has all been from home. And the first 5.5 months were in person. So I can kind of compare most things for how they were doing it in person compared to online. So if you're interested in knowing that, maybe you're interested in doing a PhD or you're just getting started, I'll be sharing that information. When I originally sat down to make the pro and con list for this video, I kind of ended up having everything go into both categories. So I would put working from home in the pro category and then also in the con category. Instead of doing individual pros and cons, I'm going to be talking about different headings: working from home, online classes, online TAing, online meetings, flexible schedules, and online conferences. Basic topics I'm going to be talking about. If you want to skip to a certain part, I'll have all of the timestamps linked down below. But I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons within each of those categories. The first thing I wanted to briefly mention as an overall pro is just the security that you have in this course, knowing that at least for the next couple of years you will be in this degree program. And I think because at the moment it's kind of a crazy time for a lot of people who either have their own businesses that are struggling with what's going on or trying to get a job in this time, I think will be very stressful. So I do think one pro is that there's the security of having this degree program / job already going for you. Firstly, for working from home, that's something that I get asked about a lot. For me, I think working from home is definitely more of a pro than a con. What I put down in my where I see myself in 5 years vision board almost a year ago was that I see myself working from home in a self-directed way on maybe freelance projects or different research projects in the future that I have some control over, but definitely being able to have that flexible schedule and being able to work from home if I want to. But I think it definitely depends person to person. I think there are a ton of pros to working from home, I guess. Being able to wear whatever you want and being able to cook food at home is one thing that I really enjoy, being able to do that throughout the day rather than having to prepare everything and then bring it in, because I find that there's times where I'm just too busy. And when I was working in the office, there would definitely be a ton of weeks where every single day I was eating breakfast and lunch in the canteen, spending loads of money on that, and as well probably not eating as healthily as I could have been if I was cooking at home. Another thing is that you can get more things done around the house on your breaks, things that you wouldn't normally have a chance to do. For example, if I have a 10-minute break in the morning, I can use that time to quickly clean up the kitchen or get a wash going or something like that, which again, you don't really get to do when you're not working from home. I also love it because I get to spend time with my dog every day and head out for a walk with her, which I wouldn't get to do if I was in the office. Then in terms of the negatives from working from home, it's the lack of social interactions that people have problems with in terms of working from home. So they miss the kind of serendipitous connections you can make in the office for when you're going for a coffee or something, that you can run into people and talk to people in the office that you wouldn't maybe get a chance to otherwise without being in the same location. And I think that can be a big challenge, especially, I live at home with my family and I have lots of friends here, so I don't really worry about that kind of thing. But I know lots of people move over here and they're new to the area, and it can be quite difficult then when you lose that social connections through your office. And it can also be difficult because you might want to ask someone a quick question sometimes. So either your supervisor or somebody else who would know a bit about a specific topic, you might want to ask them something casually without having to send in an email or get on a call, and not having the office really kind of takes that away. So I think that can be quite difficult. And another thing I think people struggle with in terms of working from home is the lack of accountability. So when you're in the office, you can see everybody working around you, and you definitely feel like you shouldn't be off scrolling the internet, watching YouTube videos while you're working. Whereas when you're at home, there's no one really to stop you doing that, and there's no real accountability. One thing that I have been talking with some of you guys about is setting up a virtual world where we can have an online co-working space. So that's something I have done through gather.town. I've set up a co-working space so that we can meet there occasionally and people can just have that on in the background, get some work done. Possibly I can share to the entire group like our Pomodoro timer or whatever it is, and people can put in the chat what they're going to be working on for those 25 minutes. And then it means in the break times we can all chat and see how we're getting on and talk about any problems or just catch up. For the first week that this is up, I will be leaving that open to the $4.99 membership, but after that it will be on a higher tier, because we can only have a certain amount of people in the room without having to increase the bandwidth of the room. I really hope I will see some of you there, and I think it'll be fun to arrange some co-working sessions, perhaps a weekly thing where we can all try and be there for specific work sessions, and then of course everyone can use it throughout the week at any time. I know there's similar things where people pay for a membership where you are set up with a single person and they act as your accountability partner. So I think this will be kind of similar, but instead we'll have a group of people, and it just means that we can all kind of keep each other accountable and get some work stuff done. I think that will be a good way to make up for the fact that lots of you are starting your PhDs, working from home, and hopefully you guys will join me there. The next thing that I want to talk to you guys about is the flexibility when you're working from home. Kind of the same in a sense, but also different. In terms of the pros, you can really design your schedule to fit your day in terms of whatever you want to have going on. If you're working in an office, it means that typically you wouldn't be able to have that same flexibility, in the sense that obviously you're there for whatever amount of time, 6 or 8 hours, and you wouldn't necessarily take a long break to really recharge, go for a walk, do a workout or something like that necessarily. Whereas when you're at home, you can really divide your day up into 2 separate sections. If you need more time during your lunch breaks, like I typically find I'm less productive in the afternoons unless I take a really long break and completely recharge and reset before the afternoon. Then again, the flexibility can have its downsides, because lots of people find it difficult then to stick to a schedule, and they also feel that they find it difficult to switch off from work in the evenings because you're in the same space all the time. Again, there's just pros and cons to all of these things, but I think it's just about finding the things that work for you to make your working from home life as productive as possible. We'll be coming out with a few more videos on working from home as a PhD student in the next couple of weeks, so definitely if you want to check those out, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you know when those videos are up. Moving on now, I want to talk about some of the things that are online that would typically be in person. One thing is meeting your supervisors. So I think again that comes back to the fact that everything has to be more formal, because you have to actually set that meeting time and set up a meeting on Zoom or whatever it is that you use. Even if you just want to talk about something small, you still have to assign a window, whereas when you're having meetings in the office, you can just say, you know, come by my office at whatever time, and it can be more casual, or it could just be a shorter meeting, or you could even just see them around the office and maybe just stop them for a quick chat. So I think it can become more difficult to arrange these meetings when you're at home, but at the same time there are pros to online meetings. One thing being that you get to meet so many more people from across the world. We've had some collaborations with other universities in New Zealand and the UK that we wouldn't get to meet if we weren't doing online meetings, and I think it's something to just get used to, because it can really help with collaboration opportunities in the future if you're used to online meetings and you're used to getting your points across without being talked over. Because I think the problem with online meetings is that once somebody speaks, it really drowns out what everyone else is saying, and it can be difficult to try and get in there and get your point across. The next thing that I want to talk about is online classes. I really like online learning. One thing I really like about it is that you can play back the videos at your own speed and stop when you get lost. I like to listen to things on a faster speed. Even often when I watch YouTube videos, I'll watch them on double speed, which I know is a bit strange, but I feel like it helps me to stay focused, because I have to try really hard to keep up with what they're saying, and otherwise I end up kind of zoning out a little bit and then I can get lost. But what I like about video learning is that you can then stop the video and go back to wherever you were before you got lost. Whereas when you're in a class in person, you can't do that, and it just means that when you get lost, you're kind of stuck, and if you miss a big chunk that will then inform the rest of the lecture, you're totally lost, and it means the rest of the lecture is kind of pointless because you can't really catch up if you've missed something important. So then the downside of this is sort of the TAing different classes that are online. I've had a couple of different experiences with this, and some people were asking me about this recently, what it's like. So I did have the the opportunity to do some demo hours. We call them demo hours because in computer science we act as demonstrators, so we are more like assistants in the lab who go around asking if anybody needs any help with the programming and things like that. So I got to do some of those in person and they were great. Like, you just walk around and, you know, if somebody raises their hand, you go over and help them. And for that particular class, when they went online, it then turned into a ticketing system. So essentially you would fill out a ticket if you were having a problem, and then one of the demonstrators who were online would pick up that ticket and then try and help you out. The problem with that is that before you assign yourself the ticket, you might not know if you're going to be able to answer the question, and sometimes they will be something that you need to go to the actual TA for the class if it's a more difficult thing. I also think that people were less likely to actually ask questions because they didn't want to go through that process and put up a ticket when it was something small. I know myself, I wouldn't have been interested in doing that. I think I would have found that kind of stressful. So I think that didn't really work for a lot of people. And towards the later labs, basically the whole 2-hour session, there would be no one asking questions, and it would just be kind of boring for the teachers then, because essentially once the ticket came, everyone was fighting over it just to show that they had done something for this 2 hours. That I didn't love, but then the module that I'm doing demo hours for now is a bit different. Instead of that, we have the practical hour where we go into breakout rooms and you have a small group of students who you can help with the lab. I think that's good in the sense because it allows people to just kind of casually ask questions if they have a small question about something rather than going through a large process. The problem I think with this is that if they have a question that is too advanced for me, I won't be able to answer it and they will have to go back into the main room to talk to somebody else. I think that can be kind of a challenge because it's just the first week. I haven't really come across this yet, but I imagine that will be something that happens, and I don't know if this will be the same way for the entire class. Those are the kind of pros and cons in terms of online learning. Moving on now, the next thing I want to talk about is online conferences. I've now been to 2 online conferences and presented at both of them, and I actually presented 2 different things at the first conference. Conference 1 was ICCBR 2020 and I presented a long paper and a doctoral consortium paper. And then the second conference I was at was Rexus 2020 and I presented a short paper in the form of a poster session. For the first conference, everything took place through Zoom. What I liked about that was that you could do the presentation and clearly see all of your slides. So I have to say a big pro is that the presenting I felt was a lot easier than any other presentation I've had to do in the past because you can see your slides in front of you rather than like having them behind you. And I also think sitting down, you have less issues in terms of speech compared to when you're standing up doing a presentation. You can become out of breath quicker and it can just make everything a bit more stressful. I think both of those presentations for that conference went really well. What was, I suppose, good about that one was that people could really ask questions in the Zoom by turning on their camera and voicing their questions, and you got to actually meet people, I suppose, in that way, or understand really who was interested in your work by seeing their faces. And then typically people could send you a chat message afterwards to say, well done, would love to chat, can we exchange email or something like that. So that was kind of how that happened. There was also some social events for that conference which I personally didn't attend because I felt very anxious about that because I'm not too comfortable with the new social situations. So what they would do is put people into random breakout rooms during the breaks. So I didn't do that and I didn't attend the banquets, but I also had a lot going on personally at that time, so that was also why I wasn't able to attend. But I think that's kind of a tricky thing with those conferences is in person you would obviously have the opportunity to be run into with people and naturally just form connections with people, naturally get to talking, and I think in those situations I'm more comfortable because you're already there, whereas I think going into into a breakout room or joining something I find more stressful and more difficult to actually get myself to do. That was the one conference, and then I'll talk about the other one because it was quite different. So in Rexus everything took place via Whova and Gather, which is how I learned about Gather before making the virtual room for all of us. In Whova all of the talks, the main talks, were through a live stream, which was good because you kind of tune in and out if you needed to without having to join the session and be very interrupting. So I thought that was quite good. It also means that everything was in the Whova app rather than having to go through Zoom links. That can be kind of tricky. The questions were put into a chat and then the person who was running the session would ask the speaker at the end all of the questions. I do think that made things a bit quicker because you weren't kind of being, calling on people, waiting for them to turn on their camera, getting their question and things like that. So I think it was probably a little bit quicker to get through those, which means you get to have more questions. So I think both of those options, Zoom versus Whova, I think they're both different and equally valid ways to present online. Obviously, a big con of the online conferences is that you don't get to travel. In June, the ICCBR conference was supposed to be in Salamanca in Spain, and the one Rexus in September that's just gone by was supposed to be in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And yeah, I find it pretty gutting that I didn't get to attend those in person because I love traveling, and one of the main reasons that I wanted to do a PhD, well, one of the side reasons I suppose that I was interested in doing a PhD was the opportunity to travel and talk to people about my research in different areas and get to see little bits of different countries, maybe get some warm weather more often than I would in Ireland. And I do think it's very disappointing that I haven't been able to do that because of the pandemic, but I'm hoping that next year I'll get to attend some in person, and I know some of the ones I'd be interested in going to will be in Italy and the Netherlands, so at least they're a little bit more local, which could mean that if they did take place I wouldn't have any travel issues getting there. The other part of the Rexus conference took place via gather.town. So this is a virtual world, which is what I was talking about a little bit at the beginning, where you have sort of a little person that can walk around the virtual world and then you can interact with people. So when you get close to someone, your cameras go on and you can actually talk the same way you would on Zoom or any other virtual platform. It's quite interesting because you can really walk around the space as if you were in person, able to just kind of bump into people, get chatting, and I think it allows for that serendipitous connection so much more. So that's why I think it's a good option for the virtual world for us. I had to present a poster through gather.town. So the way that works is that I stood beside the poster and people could see the poster and then click to interact, and then we would go into a private room where I could then talk about the poster further. And typically for that you would have like a 2-minute breakdown of the poster ready to explain to people, and then people would ask some questions. And it was a really good practice for even just talking about your work in a more like casual way than doing a full presentation and just being able to explain it in a couple of minutes. So I really enjoyed that and I think it was great. I also got to meet a few of you there. Thank you so much to everyone who did come up and chat to me during my poster presentation. It was so amazing getting to know some of you in person, kind of. It really felt like a proper meetup situation. So that's why I'm hoping that having the virtual world for myself and some of you will be a good way for us to do that more often. Another kind of con with the online conferences was that I felt very guilty all week that I was attending about not doing other work on top of being at the conference. Obviously, if I was away at the conference, I wouldn't have been doing work. I would have just been going to all the talks like I was at home and going to whatever social events that were on, and I wouldn't have been working most likely. Whereas because I was at home, I really felt guilty for not doing work while the conference was on. And I definitely did still end up doing some work, but it's just a strange thing, I think, that, you do feel like once you're at home, you should be working kind of now that the work is being done from home. So that's just another little con, apart from the fact that we obviously don't get to travel and don't get to have as many natural meetup connections as you would in person. So that's actually everything that I wanted to cover in this video. I hope that it was interesting and useful for you if you're in the early stages of a PhD or if you're thinking about doing a PhD in these crazy times. I think there is still so much benefits to doing it from home or online. I do think there's a few things that you miss out on, but then there's other things that you gain, like the flexible schedule to arrange your day whatever way you want, as well as learning to present your work in a way that you can at least be comfortable at home before getting to the point where you're presenting in person. You shouldn't let it slow you down, but I do think that there are ups and downs for everyone, and I think depending on your research topic, it could also be more difficult than perhaps I would have had in computer science. I really hope that I will see some of you on gather.town in our virtual co-working space to be able to keep us accountable and get some productive work done while being able to have some chats with each other on the breaks. Thank you so much to all of my current members. You guys really make it possible for me to keep making these videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.